today. Well, today I wanted to make this an opportunity about talking about these very, very high gas prices. Now, in case if you were watching from across the country and around the world, I mean, right now, we're starting to see unleaded gas hit $5 a gallon here in Las Vegas. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's just insane. I believe in California, it's already past $6 in many stations, some even 7, I've heard. It's absolutely absurd. And the question is, where is it going to go? Now, first of all, I never imagined it was going to get this bad. We just didn't have the demand for it. I mean, a lot of people are still working at home. People just don't have the money like they used to. And it's important to know why we've got this far. Now, a lot of people will say it's greed. A lot of people will say it's the mass expansion of the monetary supply, the supply of energy. That's another factor. But the important aspect of all this is the fact that, well, it's Wall Street speculators, commodity price speculators, that is the main reason why we're seeing, I believe, these rising energy costs. Now, who knows? It could be the main reason. It could be one of the top 3 reasons, but they certainly do have a factor on this shooting of prices, and not to mention the price dumps we saw in 2014 and in 2020. Now, if you look back, Americans were paying about $1.50 a gallon for gasoline. And yeah, I just saw your comment. Yeah, that has a lot to do with that. Because, Wall Street, who's controlled by. Got to keep in mind that in the year 2000, we were paying $1.50. And I believe we were seeing the passage of the Commodity Futures Modernization Act. Because remember, Bill Clinton deregulated the financial industry. And we were seeing the implosion of the dot-com bubble, and we're seeing the inflating of a new commodities bubble. So hot money was being transferred from the stock market and into real estate and commodities. And from that on, from 1998, we saw oil go from $18 to a peak of $147 a barrel. And it felt like the end of the world when gas was hitting $4.50 a gallon. And by the way, adjusted for inflation, gas is still cheaper than it was in the peak of 2008. So even though if we hit all-time highs, inflation adjusted, we're not. But it is commodity price speculation that's a significant factor. When you have billions and billions of dollars of hot money of all these assets that would go to real estate, stocks, bonds, all these different assets, even cryptos, and now it's going into commodities, particularly energy commodities, oil, and even now agricultural commodities. We see the price of grain escalating. And it's no surprise that Ukraine and Russia have a lot of grain because their climates are very comparable to the Great Plains of North America. We're seeing all this hot money flow in. But what is really saddening about all this is that these gas prices would not be much of an issue. And I've been telling you this for over 10 years. I've been aware about this for 15 or so years. This is the number one problem of our society, living in America and especially here in Las Vegas. The reason why these gas prices are a problem and they can be such a huge concern is simply because of the fact that our urban planning is designed in a way where you have to rely on cars. And the worst part is, it's not even that necessary. Most of the housing we see out here in Las Vegas are not homes with good-sized backyards. They're relatively close together. But despite that our housing stock is very comparable to many of the neighborhoods that you'll find in Chicago, Boston, and even New York, like Queens, unlike those areas that rely more on walking and taking transit, the way they're designed, here in Vegas and many parts of this country and around the world, these modern urban planned areas rely so much on cars. That is what the problem is. Think about it. This is the sad truth that people are not really talking about. I've been telling you this for years, that this is one of the reasons why we need new alternatives to this car-dependent urban planning. It clearly doesn't work too well, and there's a whole lot of other problems. And remember, this was largely done by government involvement from the federal level, from the FHA, the interstate highway system, go all the way down to your local land use planning. The major 6-lane arterials, which are like highways and streets in one, the building setbacks, parking minimums, all those things. I just said that to the RTC meeting here in Southern Nevada about all this to make these areas more pedestrian friendly. This is what people are not talking about. And more importantly, I've talked about the fact that I moved here to Las Vegas mainly to establish this new project of mine that was going to deliver an alternative to this system. So if you live in a tiny lot single family home, or if you live in a multi-family unit, you'll be able to walk. And you'll be able to close to non-residential areas. Not to mention that depending on the transit, it can be something that actually competes with the car. Now, a lot of people will say, well, hey, we can all just buy Teslas and Priuses and, all these different types of vehicles, right? Electric vehicles, the Nissan Leaf. I've thought about buying that. Well, here's the problem with that. Those can cost a lot of money, 40, 50 or so thousands of dollars. And that's not cheap. Okay. And of course, you need a lot of energy to power those, because even whether it's solar, natural gas, coal, they can have a lot of impact on the environment. And then to produce the vehicles, and then to produce, even the plants and all these, chips and everything, where's that going to come from? We're still dependent on other countries, right? So this is where the problem is. We're not just going to just completely go from gasoline to electric overnight. That's just not what's going to happen. Now, if you lived in an area like Chicago, where gas is one of the highest in the country, you can walk, you can take the loop. But then again, the problem is with those areas, a lot of people don't want to live there. They're either crowded, crime-infested, expensive, corruption, you name it. That's the sad truth. And really the harsh truth about all this inflation that we're having is people never really learned from the problems that were given, and that the high inflation period that we had from the period of the 2000s up into the early 2010s. Now, if you look at the chart of inflation, because even before Joe Biden took office, even before we had the pandemic, we were still having inflation issues. First, we were having inflation in tuition. We were still having inflation issues in housing costs, in healthcare, a lot of other things. And regarding commodities, people were still burned out by high gasoline prices from 2008, because that was one of the reasons why we elected Obama, because Bush was just somehow a oil maniac who wanted to just make as much money as we could. And it's funny because then the Democrats wanted lower gas prices. Now it's like they don't seem to care. But we'll get to that a little later. And then, of course, then gas prices plunged in the financial crisis. And then all of a sudden, in towards 2011 and 2012 to 2014, they went back up to $4. And then we had that incident in Russia and the oil glut, and then they plunged in 2014. Now, the thing about it is that a lot of people are still getting a lot of pain from those high inflation costs. And remember, we saw a lot of food price increases around that period of time. So a lot of people can argue we haven't adjusted from those high inflationary periods. So we have the inflation crisis. We still have the effects of the pandemic, where people are running out of their stimulus funds, their government intervention. They're not back to full employment. Housing costs are escalating, and that's going to burst only a matter of time. So what does this lead to? This leads to a horrible economy, especially here in Las Vegas. It's the sad truth. It's the harsh reality. But then again, you got to keep in mind that, well, should we feel bad for the Strip? You tell me. The fact is that the strip economy is going to suffer a lot, but I shouldn't feel bad for them because a lot of people aren't going to come because they're not going to have the money to do it, unless if they spend so much money on their credit cards, they max it out. And of course, there's a limit to that. And we know what happens. The economy just suffers so badly. But remember, it's these major strip operators, these large corporations, that essentially pumped these politicians and policies that got us into this mess. And now you got to understand, going to the strip especially is just so much nickel and diming, resort fees, this fee for drinks and whatever, parking fees and everything. Now it's ironic because MGM started the paid parking plan in 2016. And that was just shortly after when gasoline prices plunged, when Uber was introduced, and not to mention the hockey stadium, the T-Mobile Arena, was just opened. That's the reason why they started the paid parking, because I guess there were a lot of these other factors. Okay? And I think there were a whole lot of other reasons, and plus the fact that, we were, the financial crisis, that mess was starting to die down. But now with all these high gas prices, and people don't have money to spend, are the MGMs and the Caesars of the world are just going to think and realize, well, if we're not getting a lot of customers, if nobody's coming and visiting the strip, well then should we continue all these fees and high costs? Who's going to come and visit? You've seen my live videos. It's dead compared to what it was in 2019 and before. Now, some people say, well, there was a little boost in 21, but that's because they kept pumping a lot of stimulus, and maybe that's why they supported these policies, because they know they can just create dollars out of nothing and keep pumping their economy. Well, again, a lot of these corporations, they're not even succeeding because they're actually selling products that matter. I think they're getting some kind of indirect help one way or another. But this is where the problem is. The problem is it's not working. It's like literally it's on life support. And the media is just so crooked. They cover so much half-truths about what's going on. We don't know whatever happened to this whole Fauci pandemic, everything that's going on. Whatever happened to these people that took the shot? Did it work? I could be taken down by this channel by just asking these simple questions. But this is just how sick, insane, and how disgusting, how, I don't know what's the right term I could use, Luciferian these people really are. And again, am I panicking? Am I angry? Not really. I'm actually pretty glad in a way, because I'm actually glad people are seeing how awful this system is and how we need to restructure everything. It's just absolutely unbelievable. As far as what's going on in terms of overseas, look, first of all, they're telling me Ukraine is the good guys. I don't believe a lot of what these people are telling me anymore. I don't know who to trust. Frankly, I'm not even taking really any sides. So it's kind of like the Israel and Palestine thing, which, I've heard ugly stuff from both sides, which I don't really take a side. But the fact is that I know the media overwhelmingly is not telling me the truth. And maybe the invasion could be for something that is beneficial long term. Maybe they're trying to destroy something or overthrow something that's causing so much harm around the world. Who knows? But whatever it's happening, it's not helping our world in the short term, because it's causing our energy costs to skyrocket. Or at least it's an excuse for speculators to basically jack up the cost. Now, remember, it's not just speculators. From what I've seen, America is producing less oil, and the world, than it did back in early 2020. Keep that in mind. Now, do the pipelines and all these other things that got shut down by, is that has an impact? Sure. The question is it the main reason? It's hard to say. Just because they tell me it is, doesn't mean you have to believe it. Okay? So that's the problem. We all just flock to one side and just believe everything what they tell you. That's not what you're supposed to do. Even though one side tends to be more right, that doesn't mean they know exactly what's going on. You see what I mean? And it's kind of like the investment community. Now, there were people that were right about this high inflation, but remember, a lot of these people, they're charlatans. They're con artists. They were telling you to buy gold. Oil was going to go to the moon. The dollar was going to collapse 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Did it happen? No. And you missed out on the gains in the stock market. And by the way, the stock market, the PE ratios are starting to look more favorable, especially in a lot of companies. So I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing a rebound in the Dow Jones and the NASDAQ and all these other indexes. But as far as I know, it's going to be a very turbulent time. We're going to buckle up. I think a lot of these scum politicians and activists, or whatever the hell you want to call them, they're kind of going in hiding. They're making a fool out of themselves. I think we're going to see how things are going to look out this November. It's just absolutely just sickening what's happened. I feel sorry for a lot of people. In fact, look, I'm able to make it through. I'm not at a point where I'm just going to really have to just quit and just move back to my family in Southern California. No. But the problem with that is that, I don't have the kind of savings and a lot of spare income that I can put in assets, investments, and so forth. So as a result, this could delay my long-term problems. Now let's read this comment. This hate on Russia is going to fire back in the West. I wouldn't be surprised, man. I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe this was a trap set up by Russia or by the Patriots, I don't know, so that they can eventually get embarrassed, just like the COVID thing, and it's going to backfire so badly, and then they're going to change the subject. And who knows? Maybe they're going to create mass riots or something like that. Look, we're seeing voter fraud investigations happening in Wisconsin and Georgia. Maybe they're trying to cover up that. Maybe they're trying to cover up all the BS that happened from the you-know-what shots because it didn't go so well. A lot of people woke up. Maybe they're trying to cover up the border crisis. I mean, God, how many people already came into this country, plus their anchor babies? Probably about 3 million. Who knows? Now, Russia is going to do business with Asia, Europe, and America is in major decline. No surprise. If that's the case, I'm probably going to have to get the hell out of here. Forget Vegas. Forget America. This country is just becoming so upside down. Seriously. Where the hell do I go to? That's really the problem. Now, of course, America declines, and maybe those 3 million I just mentioned, along the tens of millions, well, they probably might leave the United States. I mean, heck, they just opened because Sizzalite opened a new immigration clinic for illegal aliens. Well, that's just going to be obsolete very soon because they probably want to go. Russia, China, India, Iran will do business away from... I've heard about that, yeah. Iran's going to do business away from the dollar. Maybe Iran might be a better country to live in than America. I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe their standard of living is going to go up. Look, I've seen some nice footage of Tehran. It's a pretty attractive city, if you ask me. You don't have a lot of the problems of America. We Persians, we can live a decent life. We don't need help and assistance from others. Think about it. And heck, I just posted this a while back ago that Tehran, from my research, their crime rates, their math scores, their life expectancy beats Las Vegas. And it's just unbelievable. Now, I think you know why Las Vegas doesn't do so well. It probably has to do with, I don't know, demographics exactly, but it's just saddening to see what's going on, man. I don't know. You kind of feel nervous deep down inside, and you're just like, it's just something I'm supposed to know that I don't know. I'm just thinking about it every other few minutes. What's going to happen? It's just, anything is possible, man. Anything is possible. But I'm optimistic. We're pushing back Thank God the pandemic, this whole BS is over, at least for now. I mean, they could bring it back, but I don't think people are going to buy into it like they used to. People are not that naive, and we'll have to see what's going to happen to the trucker convoy. The media is barely talking about it. I mean, I spoke to Wayne Allen Root yesterday in person. He seems to be excited around me. He just got married. But, of course, he was a main factor of Trump in the White House, and he saw him not too long ago at Mar-a-Lago. But as far as I know, man, and I know a lot of you guys are not happy with 45 because he pushed the vaccines, but hey, man, I would have done the same. Because if he didn't push the vaccines, they would have blamed it all on him. So, I mean, he was just trying to, like, make sure that he's not going to be, like, pushed around. It's things you have to do, man. You have to sacrifice things to get a lot more in the long term. That's just how dirty things are, to be honest with you. But again, don't rely on these people to rescue you. It's we, the people, that are going to fight this thing. It's we, as Americans, are going to stand up and say no to this crap. We're going to do it. We're going to have to break up these major casino giants, expose these NGOs, the fake labor unions, prosecute and hold accountable these politicians. There's a lot of people who are running. We need some candidates to run for the county commission. And by the way, I spoke to a lot of legislatures, either current and who are running from both parties. We need to break up Clark County. It's just unbelievable. I'm just going to build my project out in the desert. And I spoke to some people who were thinking about spreading my ideas for investors and so. But I'm going to build a project. We're going to create our own city, county consolidation system. And we're going to build neighborhoods where we don't need to rely so much on cars. And if gas prices go up, it's not going to be the end of the world. And even if all cars are electric, I mean, you can't even rely always on cheap energy just to keep the thing going. See, that's the problem. We need to start talking about these things. But it's sad that after all these years, since we've had the high gas prices from 10 years ago, the high gas prices from the 1970s, we never actually truly learned our lesson. That's the sad part. And one person that kind of influenced me, even though he got some of his predictions wrong, was James Howard Kunstler. He told us about this urban planning system and how it's immune to high gas prices. And by the way, my friend Thomas Christensen, he has a YouTube channel. You go to my main page, you'll see it. Today, he interviewed James Howard Kunstler about this. And this is very turbulent times. I spoke with him just 2 weeks before the so-called pandemic. And now look how fallen everything has gone. Look how fallen Vegas has gone. Just homelessness, bums, crappy people, increased violence. Police doesn't do jack. And then you see what police do to people who are trying to make a difference, who are trying to fight back. You saw the videos. It's just so backwards. Hotel security. I mean, they're not doing their job. It's just ridiculous. All the school fighting that's going on. And then what do these people do? They harass people like us. It's so backwards. I mean, I was driving down on Hacienda Avenue. There, you had cops out there. They were still hiding and giving out tickets like they were quotas. Be aware of these speeding traps, I'm telling you. Now, of course, you know, a lot of these politicians, they kind of got rid of those, I think the quotas they had or something, because they assumed that so-called you-know-whos were being pulled over. And by the way, they decriminalized jaywalking because of that. It's unbelievable. Not admitting the fact that these places are not made for pedestrians. But I just say, you know what, hey, let's just decriminalize it so I guess they can just get hit, and then that's good for, you know, European Americans, because well, that sounded pretty harsh. But anyway, you get the idea. I mean, if they're talking about dollar collapse, bring it on. Because if the dollar does collapse, let's just say if it did, like 10 years ago, like some say it would, the Asians and Latinos would leave in a heartbeat, because a lot of them come here to send money abroad. You know how the blacks would end up. I mean, you don't even want to be in any major city. And this would be good for people who want to preserve European Americans. I mean, and that's just what happened probably if we had a dollar collapse. But maybe that's why it didn't happen. See, the powers that be want to grow the economy to gain more power. But I guess now we're gotten to the point where it's grown so much that, well, maybe they can just completely take it down or collapse it. But unfortunately, I don't think that the people are that naive enough to let this, I guess you can call it a great reset. Again, it's hard to say if that's going to happen or if it's really true, but I wouldn't be surprised. This is sick, man. Everything is so upside down and backwards. It just doesn't make sense. People aren't building any families. There's a lot of videos I'm seeing how messed up dating has become. I mean, yeah, there are girls out there who still, you flirt with them and they give you a good reaction. But how much true love are you seeing out there? And this is, again, what they want. They want to make it hard for people to live by so you don't have families. And this government assistance program is designed to attract people who don't build strong families. This is all part of the plan. But this is probably why I think we should allow this whole system to crumble, because, like, hey, the whole system crumbles, we can restructure it all. Men can be men again. Women can be women again. We can have tradition. We can have a revival, a renaissance. It's things like that we need to really wake people up. As far as I know, man, Vegas is just going to be in a lot of trouble. And I've told you this before. Even if tomorrow, if Cyrus was in control of everything, we're still going to have a lot of BS that we have to recover from. Do you think these kids who wore all these face diapers, how is this going to affect them in the years ahead? It's certainly not going to be good, right? Think about it. We're going to be having a lot of illnesses, probably some mental people, who knows? I mean, I'm just concerned if I'm going to get affected by this, even though I did nothing wrong. Unbelievable. But anyway, you guys let me know what you guys think. I'm going to leave it and we're just going to pause for the next 30 seconds. And please give me your thoughts below. I'm going to be, what do you guys think? Anything you want to add? Any comments? Going once, going twice. All right. See you guys. I'll keep you posted.